I'm going to ask Chaplain Bob Ganung to start with a prayer of invocation, but just a quick comment. That's a really nice tradition that you guys have evolved, that clapping the faculty in, and it reminds me that when you graduate, all those seniors, when you graduate, the last thing that happens is, as a faculty, we clap you in when you go up on the stage. So it really speaks to what's special about this place. But let's start, if we could, with a prayer of invocation.
And if we could rise together for this prayer. Thank you. So let us come together in heart and mind and join in prayer. God of grace and God of glory, as we begin this new school year together, awaken in us the love and enthusiasm for learning that is sleeping within us. Awaken us in heart and mind and body and soul to this resplendent world, the sparkling sunshine, the scented winds, the cleansing rains, the majestic mountains, the verdant forests, and the deep blue seas. Help us to take time to pause, to contemplate it in our busy lives. Wake us up to the beauty of your creation so that we never take part of our lives for granted. Wake up the lower mids in the balcony. Wake up the mids seated below them. Wake up the upper mids moving ever closer to the front row. And wake up the seniors who will be graduating before the blink of an eye. Help us all as students, teachers, and staff to find ways this year to fully embrace each day and moment as members of this beloved Taft community. God of grace, we know this is a wonderful and beautiful world, but we also know this is a world filled with suffering as well. We only need to contemplate the wars in the Middle East and the refugee crisis in Europe, or consider the troubling crisis and reasons why Black Lives Matter has become such a powerful movement, to realize that there is sorrow and despair in our world. Many people are struggling and in pain. We pray that we will never turn a blind eye from such human suffering. Our prayer today is that we will take everything that we learn at Taft, both inside and outside the classroom, and put it to use to solve some of the serious and challenging problems that we face today in our world. Wake us up and remind us that the future depends upon each and every one of us. As new and old members of the Taft family, we pray, O living presence, that you will inscribe in our hearts the spirit of loving kindness, compassion, reason, and goodwill toward all. Our prayer this morning is that we can begin this noble work right here at Taft by intentionally working every day to create an inclusive, compassionate, and loving community that fully embraces diversity and difference. We offer this prayer in the God of many names. Amen.
Thank you, Bob. And I want to just start by welcoming all the new students and faculty. And I know obviously everyone up top is new, but I'd like, if you're a new faculty member or a new student, I'd like you to stand, and I'd like all of us just to recognize and acknowledge you and welcome you to come to Taft. So let's go. And hey. Thank you. It's a great time. It's so exciting for all of us faculty, especially if we've been here a long time, to recognize how special the day is and how special the start of the year is, because we're a new community and you've changed us and you've made us better. Every new student, the minute you set foot on this campus, you've changed this place permanently and for the better. And for that reason, it's so exciting to start. Now, what I want to do is I want to give a sort of two-part talk. I want to talk about how we meet in Bingham and what school meetings mean and where that tradition comes from. And then I want to offer a metaphor. I want to offer a metaphor or a symbol for how we might think about this year. And you should know that this tradition of gathering in here dates back to the building of this building in 1929. Horace Taft believed deeply, as do I and as do all the faculty, that gathering as a community is critical. This building was called Charles Phelps Hall when it was built. We call it CPT for short, named after the brother of the founder of the school. And so during his years, starting in 29, and then for decades afterwards and up until today, we have gathered here. And in his tenure, and really until about 25 years ago, we gathered in here for what was called Vespers, right? None of you know that term, but Vespers was at 6:10, 4 days a week, in the evening. And the Latin scholars will recognize the word. It refers to evening. And so Vespers service refers to the liturgical traditions across Christian denominations of evening prayer and of music and reflection, sometimes called evensong. And so he gathered his school every night or 4 nights a week in here at 6:10. For a man whose faith was very important, it was actually not specifically a religious tradition at all. There were speakers on all kinds of topics. And these mattered greatly to him. And I meet alumni all the time, in particular older ones, who speak of how important the tradition was. And some of them remember vividly particular Vespers services, whether it was an outside speaker or a concert or what have you. And they remember these and still tell me stories about them. I think of many who reminded me of one of the most important meetings they had, one of the most important Vespers, was when they gathered in here on what must have been a very scary and confusing day, and they listened to the radio broadcast of President Roosevelt in that famous Day of Infamy speech in which he spoke about the attack on Pearl Harbor. And we cast our memory back to what it must have been like to be a young boy at that time, knowing that you might soon be going to war. So some of the most important moments in our life as a school happen in here. The school's changed over the years, obviously, but what never changed was the purpose of gathering here, that we gather on a regular basis, that we take a deep collective breath during the busyness of our days, that we remind ourselves explicitly that we are a community, and that we hear from speakers who inspire and challenge us. Now, about 25 years ago, a committee was charged to look at the entire daily schedule. And it was a fascinating committee. A number of major changes came out of that committee and recommendations. But one was the decision to end evening Vespers and instead to create this tradition of school meetings in the morning. This was a controversial decision. I think it was a bold one. There were many who felt that we had lost something profound by no longer having Vespers. And I think we did. There was some loss, but there was a great gain as well. And there were two important reasons that the committee recommended this. The first was that the school day had felt increasingly rushed, that to race down from practice or play rehearsal or what have you, to take a shower, to get changed into formal dress, sit-down dress, to race down in here at 6:10 for a talk, and then to go to school dinner, sit-down dinner at 6:30. All of that felt rushed and compressed, and the committee felt that by moving it, we could have a little bit of a change in the feel at the end of the day, more free time, more social time, more club time. And the second was another reason. I thought this was a really powerful argument. If you argue that what was happening in Vespers was a critical part of the education, how could you defend the fact that day students couldn't often get there? After all, as I say, it was at 6:10 in the evening. And there are too many stories of a teacher beginning a class or an advisor saying, "What'd you think of that speaker last night?" And of course, a day student maybe hadn't been able to go. So we made the move, and so that's how Vespers, a kind of somber and hushed and serious gathering, moved into school meeting. Now, the reason I want you to understand that history is that it's critical to understand the feel, the mood, the tone. And I know Mr. Ganung will talk about this more later in the week, but school meeting is not assembly, okay? Which has a looser and more informal feel of announcements from students and faculty, some very serious and some less so. School meeting is a formal gathering. It's one that we hope that will be intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally uplifting and challenging. You'll hear from elected officials, military leaders, authors, and educators. You'll hear from faculty and students. You'll hear poetry and music. You'll see dance. These minutes, I think, in here are precious and potent. And so while on one hand, I know they are a break, in a sense, from the morning and from a busy day, they are also serious. I remind you that, I thought about this on Sunday, this is where we gathered 15 years ago when those planes flew into the towers. It seemed inevitable. It seemed absolutely appropriate. We all understood that Bingham was where we needed to gather as a school that day. And this is where we prayed and wept and found strength and courage and love. And so this meeting and this space, I think, can be sacred. So there's some basic expectations. We obviously ask you that you leave your books outside, put your mobile device away and off, find your seat promptly and quietly, become silent when the speaker ascends the stage, obviously welcome them respectfully, applaud at the end, and that we always leave in a dignified manner with the seniors leading us out. And I just think it's critical that you all now are the holders of this tradition, and you have to pass it on intact. And if you have suggestions or questions, don't hesitate to contact me or Mr. Ganong. So that's the history. Here's my topic. I want to think about how a table serves to symbolize all we strive to be as a school, and how I might argue that that symbol is one we need now more than ever. And the table I'm thinking of is one that Horace Taft sat at on the first night of his school about 126 years ago. Now, Taft was a Yale graduate, and his career appeared to be heading to law, but in 1890, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which his college roommate had started a school in California, he decided he would start a school. He had very little training. He had done a little bit of tutoring, but no more than that. So he rented a modest house about a mile away from the Pelham Manor train station, those of you who know Pelham or Pelham Manor. He rented it from a family friend. He sent out some pamphlets announcing that he was creating, and he called it Mr. Taft School for Boys. And he had a vision. And the vision was of a school that would provide an education that was at once intellectual, I think moral, spiritual, physical, and artistic. Over the years, he would call this, and I could use this quote, the education of the whole student. And that has remained and is to this day our mission. On that first day, that first summer, a few families wrote inquiries, not many. A handful enrolled, and then finally came that opening September day with carpenters banging in bookshelves and bunk beds, not unlike us trying to finish HTT, and students dragged their suitcases up the steps. And this is what he remembered, and this is what he wrote in his 1942 memoir, which was penned only a few feet away from here in the house he retired in. This is what he recalled from that day. He said, 14 of us sat down at the table that night. That table we still have. And it is our only relic of the Pelham Manor days. The table mattered, you can tell. I mean, note the declarative, that table we still have. And he must have treasured it. As far as I know, though, it's gone, lost to time. And as someone who loves symbols with more than a touch of sentimentality, I lament the loss of that table. And here's why. The table seems to me a perpetual reminder of what a community might try to be, a symbol of what our mission of the education of the whole student might look like. That is, gifted students and teachers and curious students gathered around a table with a shared purpose, speaking and listening to one another, perpetually learning and growing. That motif of the table is an ancient one, if you think about it. I think it is as ancient as humanity and a reflection of how there's something elemental in our experience, our quest for belonging and sharing and exchanging. That table is the photograph of world leaders at a summit, intent and collaborative. It's Martin Luther King and his reference to the table of brotherhood in his finest speech. It's the apostle at Christ's Last Supper and the Jewish family gathered around the menorah. It's King Arthur and his knights. The table, I think, is at the essence of what we try to be as humans, our hope that we might have voice and a hope that we might be heard. And so I like to think that there's something for us in that image, and maybe that it could speak to all of us. The scene reminds us, and it certainly reminded me as I thought about it, that this is a place where students and teachers sit down together. And I mean that literally, of course. You sit down, as you did last week and you will tonight, at sit-down dinner, or perhaps with your advisor at lunch, or maybe around a table with a teacher guiding a discussion. But I mean it obviously as well figuratively, that we are as a community a table in which faculty are going to be deeply and caringly and compassionately involved in your life. The numbers have changed. We're not a school of 14 anymore, but I think the essence never has. It's just that we're bigger. We've made more room at the table. You think as well of what it means to sit at a crowded table, and that we might realize we have to give what I would call elbow room. There's a kind of cooperation that happens at a table that serves as a nice metaphor. There's a trust in each other, as if we all are saying, you want to belong just as I do. We need each other. In the same way we're respectful of the physical space we occupy at a table, in the same way we make room for someone new, I think we offer elbow room as a community. I like to think that there's more than enough room for everyone at the table of Taft, and that we genuinely embrace the fact that it's a noisy, colorful, and crowded table. The boys and girls and men and women from scores of nations worshiping in diverse manner, in all ways of living as sexual beings, with the beautiful palette of skin colors, animated by the wonderful richness of ethnicity, and charged by the electrical difference of politics. You got room for someone like me, you ask? Heck yeah, pull up a chair. Now that is an interesting table. That's how you might think of a school, where we feel fortunate to sit at such a table, where we happily make room for each other, not despite the differences, but because of them. You're sitting down doesn't mean I've got to get up. There's plenty of room. And consider this. You need a kind of respect and civility at the table I've described. Otherwise, it just won't work. There has to be an unspoken and implied expectation of manners, a willingness to listen, some kind of unwritten rules of conduct, very much like those in a family, if you have formal dinners. Think of Taft as this giant table, and we're all gathered around diverse and powerful and vibrant and even clashing perspectives, and it is all voiced respectfully and civilly. Now, maybe I should say a bit more here, because what I've described is very hard to create. There are other symbols I could have chosen that would be much easier to strive for. The school as table takes effort, and it takes more. It takes courage and empathy and vulnerability and patience and acceptance. Sitting at the table of Taft means in a class or Bingham, you may sometimes feel uncomfortable with a perspective that unsettles you. Sitting at the table in the dorm or the dining hall means you may share a perspective that others disagree with. That should happen at a school like this, whether it's your interpretation of Macbeth's soliloquy, your argument on America's use of the atomic bomb, your defense of a political candidate. That's what a good education looks like. By the way, that's how we are stretched. That's how you move from your own personal darkness into a different kind of light. We don't want a table where everyone thinks alike, where people are worried their views will be silenced, or where we fear worse, that we won't be heard. I think we want to strive for something that is rare and lofty, tongue and ear, voice and hearing. And now more than ever, I think this metaphor resonates. This nation, and I would argue so many nations today, is struggling mightily to converse around the table of citizenship on the many issues that define us as a nation: race, sexuality, policing, immigration, climate change, gun control. We struggle to do what I hope we can do here. Our national voices too often sound frightened, angry, and hurt. Our listening too often is fleeting, reluctant, and imperfect. Tragically, these two tendencies cannot be separated. And in fact, I think they increase each other in some kind of catch-22 or irreversible spiral that sounds something like this. You won't listen, so I'm going to shout even louder. Yeah? Well, then I'm not going to listen. Fine. Then I just won't say anything. Good. Then I won't have to hear you. When you get to that place, as a community, or as a nation, as a family, you cease to function. So I argue for the table. I have no illusions that to sit at this table of Taft is without challenges. I have no illusions that we are perfect, that we won't stumble, that we won't make mistakes. It's inevitable, maybe even healthy. And all these challenges come with the fact that we've assembled this and every year a diverse community of really smart and really opinionated, informed, and passionate students and faculty. And this is how it should be, and I would not want it any other way. So when we sit at this table, as Taft did at the first night, we face each other. We open our hearts and minds, and maybe something beautiful happens. We speak in a voice of honesty and courage, and we listen with an ear of empathy and respect. We debate with passion and rigor, and we collaborate with fearlessness and optimism. There is something I sense even in these opening days that moves me greatly and inspires me deeply. I was with a group of faculty yesterday who spoke to this. In the way that you are all encountering each other, in ways that older students were reaching out to younger students and new students to pull them into the community, in the spirit and love and fun that I couldn't help but feel in that paint-splattered Super Sunday, in the principled leadership that I've seen in the school monitors, the dorm mons, the committees, in the conversations I've already overheard in hallways and dorms and classrooms, in the really impressive and lovely care that you have for each other, and for the hopes I've heard explicitly from so many of you, and I sense from all, that you want to do something special and you want this to be a great year. You sense that we might be able to do something special and rare, that you in this room are trying to create something that few schools are able. And I applaud you for that, and I'm really proud of you. So that table horse Taft kept when he moved to the school to the Watertown, and which clearly meant so much to him, it's gone. He lost it. We've lost it. But maybe not quite. Maybe it exists here still, that table as an idea or as an aspiration. Maybe it's still here as a dream, beautiful and stubborn, something that we will fashion each of us every day and every moment on every corner of the campus. And so it's with that spirit that I welcome all of you. I look forward to getting to know those of you who are new, and I look forward to witnessing which I hope is going to be a wonderful year. Thank you, and welcome to the year.